I'm delighted you all came out tonight. It's good to see my Simon Institute colleague, Bill Freivogel, here. I will go over election coverage, Peter, just from the point of view of a political scientist and a recovering print journalist. And, Bill can talk to you about the recovery process. Then I want to talk about some the technological changes in the media landscape, some recent data from Pew that I'll try to put my own spin on. And they taught me in graduate school to always ask the so what question. My political science program was a policy-based program. And so some of my professors strongly believed that if I was getting paid a graduate stipend by the public in the social sciences, I should be doing research that meant something rather than just stat jockeying. And I'm in that position at the Simon Institute too. I think we try to do stuff that has policy and educational implications. So I like to tag a so what couple of slides on my presentations. It came from a colloquium one of my fellow doctoral students and I were doing at St. Louis, Claude Louison, who's now at University of Nebraska-Kearney. He's a real professor. And we were doing a presentation on redistricting in St. Louis County after the 1990 census. And cranky old professor, I suppose that's redundant, was in the back of the room, and every time we put up a new slide, he'd say, "So what?" We were flustered, and he was pretty hard on us. And afterwards, he came up and said, "I was hard on you boys." His name was Eugene Meehan, and in public policy and public policy and administration, he was a big deal for a long time. So he had us over to his house for a nice white Bordeaux and some cheese, and all was forgiven. But that was when Gene told us that he expected, as public policy students, we should have a so what question. A little bit about my background. I was a journalism student at the mothership, University of Missouri-Columbia. Graduated in 1979. Normally I mumble that year, but I think I'm okay here. And I worked at the old St. Louis Globe-Democrat, and I was an editor at St. Louis Magazine. I was a feature writer by training at Mizzou. And I went into commercial journalism after that. I edited Painting and Wall Covering Contractor magazine, which was every bit as exciting as it sounds. And after a couple of years in business journalism, I decided to follow my passion for politics and political science, and went to graduate school at University of Missouri-St. Louis. If I'd known they were going to make me do that much math, I'd have probably gone into history. But by then it was too late. I went into private practice as a political scientist at an attitude research company, where we did polling and election consulting. We did a little bit of candidate work, but our specialty was in initiative and referendum. And we passed a lot, my colleagues continue to pass a lot of school bond issues in fast-growing suburbs, raising taxes on people with their permission, of course. But that was a young person's game, all that travel and late nights and election nights. And it's time to start having kids, so I turned to the academy, where I was at Lindenwood University in St. Charles, Missouri, University of Texas at Dallas Gall, until moving back more or less home. I'm a Midwesterner, my wife is a Midwesterner. Something wasn't right about Texas. Came back home. Some of you may know my wife is the dean of the College of Liberal Arts. That's why, more or less what people put out with me around here. I want to talk a little bit, since we're in election season and have just had if you watched the debate last night, like I did, and left just a little bit dumber than when you started. I'm going to make some observations about the media age. I come to you as someone who was socialized as a journalist. The journalistic norms and the objectivity and the need to talk to people on all sides and the need for balance and the need to subsume your opinions. And of course, I was joking with some of my colleagues earlier, re-socialized as a graduate student in political science by my professors. So I sort of have a foot in both camps for the purposes of tonight's presentation. And people in the political parties actively recruit people for office. And one of the things they look for today is people who are telegenic. And for someone in the policy world, I want smarter people rather than telegenic people. It's good to get both. I have nothing against good-looking people. Of course, in J school, in the print side, we used to say snarky things about the TV people. I'm over that.
Too bad.
Well, the older I get, the more tolerant I am, and the better looking younger people get all the time. Now, here's an example, maybe fair, maybe unfair, from 4 years ago. The McCain camp thought that by getting a female running mate for John McCain, they could capture some disaffected Hillary Clinton voters who were obviously only interested in the gender of somebody. What? But there were at least two very experienced, very smart women senators in Olympia Snowe and Kay Bailey Hutchison. We could throw Susan Collins in there, who were experienced, at carrying the water and getting stuff done, being smart on public policy. Kay Bailey Hutchison is nobody's panty-waist liberal, being elected and re-elected in Texas. Why did they get Kay Bailey Hutchison? Maybe because they were interested in Governor Palin's telegenesis. She looked good on the box. I think the campaign would have been better served. And it's a truism, right, that Abraham Lincoln couldn't get elected today. Big, gangly, funny-looking lawyer from Illinois. Wait a minute. But who apparently had was described as a high, girlish voice, ungainly. William Howard Taft, think of his presidency as you will. TR was disappointed in him, but he was smart enough to be Supreme Court Justice. Here's my Missouri homie. Could Harry Truman get elected in the television age? I don't think he could. I think he's funny looking, and he had a bad temper, and he drank bourbon in the morning. Yeah. Telegenic. Don't you miss old Dutch sometimes? No. So, I was talking to some of you earlier before we started. Television has supplanted reality for a lot of people. I don't want to go wandering too far off on that tangent. But people have friendships on sitcoms, and those interactions substitute for real interactions you would have out in the world socializing with people. And it's the new reality for people. I'll tell you another war story. When in my political consulting early days, the Zoo Museum District in St. Louis is a property tax district that is why you could go to the zoo for free. and the art museum for free because the city and the county pay a little mill of property taxes. And the History Museum in Forest Park wanted to go from being a private Missouri Historical Society, now having their own issues again, aren't they? Same outfit. And they wanted to join the taxing district, so we did the polling and helped do the consulting for them to do a referendum to join the taxing district. You're probably in Washington then. But there was a scandal. A director of the museum was stealing Lewis and Clark artifacts and selling them while the campaign is going on. And the people behind the campaign said, we got to stop, we got to pull the plug. The director is stealing Lewis and Clark artifacts and selling them. And we said, well, not so fast. I think you ought to do a survey first. And they were crazy, it's on the front page of the Post-Dispatch every day. We can't possibly. We did a survey, and a quick and dirty 400 sample survey, and found that something like 8% of the people knew that something was going wrong at some museum. Of those people, most of them thought it was at the art museum. Now, are you to think I weep for my country? The director is stealing not just any artifacts. And it's on the front page of the paper every day. We went ahead with the campaign and obviously won. Why? It wasn't on the television. Because a stolen tobacco pouch is lousy TV. TV news didn't pick it up. So if it wasn't on TV, it didn't happen. So if you want to try to run a campaign of any size without TV, you can't. Because if it's not on TV, it didn't happen. Why do people stop me in the Kroger? Because they saw me on TV. Do they have any concept of anything I ever said? Let's not flatter myself. This is where we are. As a policy person, I get cranky with the reality that policy is hard to convey on television. So when you see politicians attacking each other's character, it's because character is something we understand, kind of. It means something different to you than it does to me. And it serves as a proxy for characteristics that are hard to convey. I don't like that guy's character. You can't call him stupid. You can, but character is something everybody understands, and they have some visceral feeling that good character is something we want to have in our politicians. And we've been doing a fine job, haven't we, of electing people with good character. If you want to be reminded of how bad a medium television is for conveying policy ideas, I commend to you a recording of last night's debate. Those of us who couldn't stay awake. Those guys are pretty deep in the policy weeds. Some of it might have actually been true. But true or not, it doesn't matter to somebody who can't engage it. You can't explain to me Medicaid funding standing at a podium with a 2-minute time limit. And political scientists who study elections complain about that. I'm sort of over it now too, because there's nothing you can do. Television is the medium for now, and we'll talk about that later. And it doesn't convey policy well. You can throw up charts and graphs. They don't help. Another thing we don't like in the graver texts and other things we teach politics and media out of is the emphasis on the horse race in election coverage. Who's ahead? Who's up in the polls? I share some measure of guilt for putting polls out there that ask election questions in a policy questionnaire. And we do it to get media coverage just to poor little piece of our survey so we can get some news. But why aren't we more interested in the policy? What would someone do if elected? And when there is issue coverage in the global mass media, it's couched in horse race terms. Well, Romney's doing this because he doesn't want to lose the old people vote. We could entertain the possibility, however briefly, that Romney is doing it because he thinks it's good policy or believes it will help people. But it's couched in terms of the horse race. He did this because he's cobbling together this or that constituency. Obama needs the gay vote, like he wasn't going to get it otherwise. That's not why he did this. See, it helped him in the polls. It's not causal, right? The causal arrow is not always there. But we don't have a long time to explain it. I'm doing some things. I'm going to do some things tonight to you that the PowerPoint gurus say we must never do. Here's one of them: a bunch of little numbers on a chart. This is from the Graeber text that I use when I teach politics and media. And the left-hand column is the percentage of mentions of different kinds of stories in the newspaper covering elections. This is from 2000, I think. The percentage of mentions in television news coverage of elections. And the third column is the percentage of people in a survey who say that issue is the most important issue. You can tell it's an old survey because 44% said social problems are the most important issue. What we have here, somewhere, I have a laser. In the newspaper, 47% of mentions about election stories are about election campaign events. 61% of TV mentions are about events. John McCain was in Denver today, and ticker tape and flags. And it's not issue coverage. And what percent say campaign events are most important? 0. Social problems get a tiny proportion of mentions in this content analysis, and a plurality in the companion survey say social problems are the most important. So the media, any of you guys know the gerrymander book? Was that 4 Arguments for the Elimination of Television? I used to teach out of that, and I just can't get the kids to buy it anymore. They get hostile when you tell them television is bad. It's like you're talking about their mom or something. Well, let's not go there. But Mander says the television is not showing you reality. It's like putting a box over your head and looking around. You can't not use it. But I asked the students, did you watch the football game last night on TV? Yeah. Well, you weren't watching a football game. Yes, I was watching a football game. No, you weren't watching the football game. If you're at the stadium, you're watching the football game. You were watching a show about a football game. You didn't see it. It wasn't your choice what you saw about that football game. It was the director's choice what you saw. You were watching a show about a football game. That's when I start getting bad teaching evaluations. Because I'm talking bad about their baby. Issue coverage on television is hard. Can't do it. It's not the medium's fault. It is what it is. The debates, they're not debates either, but they're a show about debates made for television. In a political campaign like ours that's static, where there isn't much movement, we have to try to create some drama. And so we say, this is the make or break event. Maybe it is. If you look at the history of debates, the make or break debates, Bill, can you think of more than one? Kennedy-Nixon. The technology was barely good enough to show Nixon's 5 o'clock shadow. We all know that story, that people who heard it on the radio thought Nixon won. People saw it on television, thought Kennedy won. But you're no Jack Kennedy. You know, what are some of the lines? There you go again, and where's the beef? It's stuff you remember from a show. What does it have to do really with politics? It's a show about politics. And we're voting like, it's almost like Dancing with the Stars. The debates, we're whooping it up, but the proportion of American television viewers paying attention to the debates, to the extent we can stay awake, is shrinking. You weren't the only one. You made it 5 minutes.
I was sitting in a chair and I just
You should get a cookie.
Who do you think?
So it's the big event, but if you look at the proportion of voters and viewers over the years who've been watching it, some of you may not know, but when we were young, there were 3 channels. And they were all 3 showing the debate. And we waited all year for Wizard of Oz to come on at a certain time. But there I'll go again, as President Reagan famously said. And what is the coverage about? Obama was looking at his notes. Oh, well, then I guess I won't vote for him. That tears it for me. Dude looking at his notes. And they're anticipating zingers, and I'm watching the morning show. Boy, Romney's been practicing zingers. He's going to say, "We're not picking winners and losers. You're just picking losers," and it was in there. That's not the zinger. Is that public policy? Is that telling us what you would do? Is it using the medium almost the only way you can use it? And there are instances in which the spin is more important than what was actually said. The debate is cast to be rebroadcast the next day or two in little parts with those zingers or that gotcha, or maybe that pithy insight that came through, and to be analyzed. Many more people will watch the news reporting about the debates than will watch the debates. So it's not about the debates, it's how it's going to be carved up and repackaged. I remember clearly when President Ford sat in a debate with Jimmy Carter that Poland was not under Soviet domination. And I went, oh, what? But it didn't raise an eyebrow that night. But the next morning, it was on every news outlet that Ford doesn't know that Poland is dominated by the Soviets. So that came out of the post-debate news environment. And that's what the strategists are aiming for. It's not only a show about politics, it's a review of the shows about politics. Just like theater can sometimes play to the reviewers. These guys are packaging a show to the reviewers. Isn't this cheerful? Now I want to talk a little bit about the changing media landscape, just to add more happy parts, at least to a few of us old ink-stained wretches. Masthead of the old St. Louis Globe-Democrat, Bill's competitor and friends and drinking buddies at the Missouri Grill. I worked at the Globe during its death rattle, that from the Joint Operating Agreement closure era in the 80s. The sort of first, well, one of many rounds of deaths of newspapers in our history, but the first big one in my lifetime. Christian Science Monitor, famous for generations for great, in-depth reporting and smart analysis is online only. A great city has lost at least the daily nature of its newspaper. The New Orleans Times-Picayune. This is the kind of thing that gets old guys like me right in the heart. The Times-Picayune is 3 days a week, I think. The rest of the time online. Is that right? So, on one level, to old newspaper readers and writers, this is tragic and terrible. Or do we stop and think, what if as many people are reading it as were before? This is something that's knowable. We can find out soon what happened to the number of eyeballs that hit the reporting produced by the remaining staff of the Times-Picayune. If as many people are consuming the news product as before, it's okay to be nostalgic about ink stains on your fingertips. But what are we really interested in? Are we interested in the Dead Tree newspaper? Or are we interested in people becoming informed about the world? And can they still get Doonesbury? At some level, this is sad and sort of painful, but is that nostalgia, or is it somebody interested in the policy of getting the story out and to as many eyeballs as possible? Here's some data from Pew. Again, this is the thing that the PowerPoint gurus tell you not to do. Here is, here's my laser. Where did you get your news yesterday? Pew asks, and this goes back to 1991. That is watch the news on television. That greenish line is read a newspaper yesterday. The brownish line is listened to radio yesterday. And this new line got online and mobile news, which has now surpassed radio and Dead Tree newspapers. They got it on their gadget. So, I wish I knew what happened here and why it steadied out in 96. But from 96's 56, 57% to 2012's 55% is not a change in a survey. But the steady drop of read a newspaper and listen to the radio news will make some of us nervous. And this is where your students are probably going. Here's another thing I want you to keep in the back of your head. Online and mobile sources have surpassed the traditional newspaper. We know that the decline in print consumption comes very largely from young people who don't have the print newspaper habit. And Pew, data from Pew warns us that TV, though it looks like it's holding steady, could be next. Here are the age groups, 18 to 29, 30 to 49, us guys, 65 pluses. Look at the percentage only 6 years ago who watched any TV news yesterday is down 15 points. Only a third of 18 to 29-year-olds compared to half just a few years ago are watching any TV news. And the 50 plus is growing, although that's probably statistical noise. It's flat.
But Charlie, you're watching it on the internet. Like you said, you see bits of, you don't have to watch the entire debate, you see bits of debates, which is television through your internet. So it depends on how you define television.
Yeah, and it depends on how you define news.
That's true for internet as well.
Yeah. What a mess. Did they watch news? And I'll ask you again in a minute, was it news by a journalist who socialized to professional norms by her professors or peers? Or is it any knucklehead with an internet connection? I know you're not talking about these things in J School these days. And again, I apologize for this jumble of numbers, but what it shows is the percent change of age groups using social networks like Facebook and Twitter to get news. And this is in just 2 years. Among people under 30, it's doubled in 2 years. People who are using Twitter and Facebook and whatever else you young people use.
And so could we understand that as to say that one of my friends on Facebook links to a New York Times article, so then I go read that New York
Yes.
Times article?
Yes.
So it's not that the users are generating that news, but it's just that's how they're being directed.
Well, it's you be careful about question wording and over-interpreting our vague questions. Like, saw any news on social networking sites yesterday. So if I like WSIU on Facebook, then it feeds me news. Or you posted something on your Facebook that goes, this is the cutest kitty video ever. Like my friends do. Like, you're grown people. Stop posting kitten videos. But I digress. So it's any news anywhere. Again, like Dean Lemish said, what is news? What is television? Okay, if more people use social networks for news, so what? If as many people are getting trustworthy news, whatever trustworthy means, professionally produced news by your students, for you, is that okay? How much does the format matter? Especially if some of the formats we use to convey political news are inherently flawed, as I and other people argue television is inherently by its technology.
Yeah, and you can probably address this later. Going on course, but one of the interesting issues about print newspaper is that newspapers can afford varying degrees, like the New York Times or Nationwide, to hire the journalists to collect the news and to write the news. Bingo. When you get rid of newspapers, you don't have these journalists to collect the news. What are all the news aggregators going to do? What are all the people who are on social networks going to do to get news to send out to their friends? What's YouTube going to do? There are lots of issues that stand up here and say, wait a minute, I don't think we're going to disappear and go gently into that night as a newspaper, unless they start to try to make internet newspapers and hire journalists to collect the data.
Yes, that is precisely true, and that's one of my assumptions in this presentation. One of the things we have to do is figure out a way to make money.
They're moving
to the paywall model, and they made the mistake of introducing it free first. So now if I'm telling students to do a project about urban reform in Dallas, they can't go to the Dallas Morning News to see what's happening now. Fortunately, they can go to Fort Worth Star-Telegram, which is probably better. So that is exactly part of the so what question. Here's another. Yeah.
There's another issue that I've been thinking about when I go on my Facebook feed and look at the articles that people have posted, the links. Most of them are articles that simply repeat my point of view, so it's like preaching to the converted. So it's occurred to me that if I depended on my friends on Facebook, I would never read an oppositional news piece.
And we,
except for a few.
We impose, yeah, we impose those filters on ourselves too, by the cable channels we choose.
Well, it's a different system of gatekeeping.
Yeah.
Your friends are actually your gatekeepers who.
And the micro fracturing of news outlets lets us, it's almost like a multi-party political system, choose the cable channel. I'm a centrist, I'm a lefty, I'm a righty. We can insulate ourselves from opposing views anyway, and Facebook gives you even more people who think just like you, except for the couple of wackos you went to high school with. Where we live affects how we use media, as many of you who have lived in big places know. When we live in small places,
We use media differently. And I'll talk about, I promised you local trends, so I'll give you some Southern Illinois data in a minute. Obviously, the urbanites have the widest, urbanites and suburbanites have the access to the widest variety of platforms for getting their political news. Suburbanites, according to one survey, spend more time listening to radio than urbanites, obviously, stuck in traffic. I bought a little cheap car for my son that has XM radio in it, which is kind of cool, but after the free period, how long am I in my car in Carbondale? To listen to satellite radio. So suburbanites and urbanites have access to the same stuff, but they use it differently. It's sort of urban geography, obvious stuff. And in the small towns and rural areas, people rely more on traditional media, and we see that for sure here, and again, I'll elaborate. More reliance on traditional media, especially local newspapers. Another aside, I live just outside of town, and I can't get the Post-Dispatch, or the Chicago Tribune, or the New York Times, except on Sunday. I'm not that far out of town. But all I can get is the mighty Southern Illinois and the Sunday Times, who tried like the Dickens. And Tribune even billed us, but they couldn't get a big city paper. We tried real hard. So this is all sort of, people are doing research to prove stuff we thought we already knew. Here's some more little stuff. This is from Pew's Project on Excellence in Journalism. And they did a content analysis from late August into the third week or so of September during the political conventions. Here's Twitter, blogs, and Facebook. And they did a content analysis of tone. You've seen studies that rate the tone of news coverage, and they did the same with social media. And the tone is a lot more negative, even during the party conventions, when on the mainstream media outlets, the tone of Romney during the Republican convention and the tone of coverage of Obama during the Democratic convention was 60-40 positive to negative. But throughout this period, the tone is more negative than positive all throughout the period. Social media are more negative in tone than even the mainstream media.
It's an easy and quicker, snarky.
Yes.
We have to be. You only have 140 characters. It's really hard to spend time saying neutral or positive things. You have to say something negative, so you tend to get people getting snarky in their tweets.
Sure. And when they pile on Facebook. I mean, there's lots of reasons we can intuit why that is. And it makes sense. So what? So if more people, especially young people, are getting their news from social media, and the tone of the social media is more negative than the professional media, are people new to this part of their citizenship seeing our politics in an even more negative light than before. If there's more social media and if the social media are more negative, does that make them less engaged than if they got their news from professional sources? Because any knucklehead with an internet connection can weigh in, and we don't even know what news is to the people who take this survey. Did you get any news? We didn't define news for them. They tell us they thought they got some news. Are they absorbing political information in a more negative and less professional light? Because some of us brought up in journalism schools believe in professional journalism and believe in the ethics and norms and the practices they taught us. And are those people socialized with the professional ethics that we expect of our students who enter this profession? Are they becoming unmoored from professional journalism? Because what is TV? What is news? What is a journalist? Yeesh. 1979, we thought we knew what a journalist was. We may have been wrong, but at least we thought we knew. Will political reporting become unmoored? I don't think so, but I think it's a question we should ask and explore. I follow Illinois politics, so there's a blog for us Illinois political geeks called Capital Facts. And he's opinionated, but he's a journalist. He has journalistic ethics, and when he expresses an opinion, he tells you it's opinion. And he has sources, and he won't name them if they ask him not to. He doesn't follow all the journalistic ethics you'd expect of somebody in a print newspaper. He at least knows what they are. And some guy with a blog can have a great sense of humor and cover funny topics and not be a journalist. So what too? What about Southern Illinois and our access to media and media use in Southern Illinois? Are we different? We think we are. We think we want to secede from Chicago, but then we haven't done the math. In 2010, in our Southern Illinois poll, the last 3 or 4 years we've been doing a poll of just Southern Illinois, which is south of I-64, all the counties south of I-64, except for the Metro East counties, because the real Southern Illinoisans tell us how those guys are. So those are St. Louisans. So we did a bunch of questions about media usage in Southern Illinois. And let me throw up what they told us about their news consumption. 93% watch local TV news. 2/3 say they watch cable news. Are these people really watching this much news? 6 in 10 read a daily newspaper. Most of them mention the Southern, either first or second. Half of them or so read a weekly newspaper. Radio news by 40%. I haven't broken it down by county, but I bet you the farther out you are, the more radio you listen to. A third said they read a newspaper online or other internet source. This was a couple years ago. I would make that question a little more granular now, maybe make it 2 or 3 questions, but the data are what the data are. Politics is data are. Sorry, stickler. 34, does that seem low? Well, it's probably higher today. I mean, we saw how quickly those numbers can jump on the Pew data in just a couple of years. Our survey sample was pretty old. Southern Illinois is the oldest part of the state. Older people, as we saw in the data, don't use online media at the rate younger people. You have to explain to your mom how it works. And the internet coverage is terrible in Southern Illinois. Broadband coverage, so let me show you a couple maps, is terrible. Our friends at Connect SI over at the Dunn-Richmond Center are working to try to increase broadband connection. That's Union County, that's Saline County. The bright green you would see, if there were any, is fast internet coverage. See, there's the legend. That's the heavy download speed. And the best you can see is this weak coverage, and red is no coverage. Look at that, Union County. No broadband coverage. None. This is where our political media are going, and these people, not many, obviously. You could overlay a population density map, And that's what you get, right? Because the broadband follows the population density. But we're not supposed to write people off of our democracy because they live out in the sticks. We should get them a Chicago Tribune. I'm not bitter. So Union and Saline County, well, here in the metropolis, can't possibly be that bad, can it? Here's Jackson and Williamson, and that color about lines up with the third best internet speed around Marion toward Carterville, over here in the Dale, or over here in the Dale. Murphy, there's the Dale, there's Murphy. But none of that is the great super high-speed broadband. And look, here in Jackson County, broad swaths of super slow or no coverage at all. And certainly doesn't that help explain that only 34% of Southern Illinois registered voters are using online sources to get the news. And that's where the news is going. So this will change, that they will get broadband someday, because you have to get them their television commercials somehow when television moves to their laptops. That will change slowly, and as we move the bulge through the demographic snake, younger people will demand more broadband than their parents and grandparents on the farm are demanding right now. But these are what passes for an urban county around here, and that's pretty lousy coverage. Nevertheless. So, coverage in the election season, in the current technology, the gerrymanders television, we're looking at shows about politics rather than what we might call real politics. This is also a smug, elitist political scientist's view of the world. Sorry. What I have become.
People listening to too many Republicans.
Well, there's no doubt that I have been. Hope it doesn't affect me too much. It's bread and circuses. But the technology of journalism, of communication is changing, and it was ever thus. So maybe I should stop being cranky about the death of dead tree papers if the reporting is good and professional and people are going to it. They'll still sell me a paper if I want one. The product they're doing for tablet computers these days, though, is pretty terrific. The iPad magazines and papers, it's pretty good-looking stuff. It doesn't sting your fingers. If the non-traditional media is growing and replacing the traditional media in which we were raised and socialized, are the people creating the product being trained with journalistic norms and balance and fairness and subsummation, that's a word, of our personal view of the world to get information to our audience, to let them make decisions about their politics. And I do still believe at that time it's important stuff. And older, poorer, and rural people are behind in getting access to where the new media is rising. And if that's where we're going to be getting the information we need to make our electoral decisions, then that's a problem. That's a so what problem. Large numbers of people cannot have access, easy access, to where that information is being presented. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. It's on a PowerPoint, it must be true. I'm delighted to take questions about this or anything. If you have questions.